Fears remain high that a Russian invasion of Ukraine is imminent, setting off a wider dispute between Moscow and the West, including potentially over gas. A Russian spokesman said Monday that the country would not cut off its supplies to Europe, but Moscow's leverage in energy politics is hard to ignore. It's the largest single deliverer of natural gas to the EU, and demand is only set to rise.
New developments in Russia and Ukraine deepen an existing energy crisis across Europe, a crisis that impacts us here in the US. Hi, I'm Yasmin with Rebel HQ. Now, if you caught the damage report yesterday, John and I did discuss this a little bit, but I wanted to go into further detail today. There are a few different things at play, so keep that in mind. But first, an update. After finally declaring Putin's alleged peacekeeping operation in Ukrainian territories an invasion, President Biden announced that the U.S., in coordination with our allies, would impose sanctions on Russia, escalating the severity of the sanctions if and when Russia chose to escalate the situation. In addition to sanctions, Biden said the U.S. would continue to provide defensive military support in Ukraine as well as in the Baltics.
Russia, of course, is the main EU supplier of natural gas, and critics have long been warning that the EU could be too dependent on Russian gas, which also led to the controversy surrounding the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has yet to go online.
The loss of the pipeline is a big deal, but let's talk about Russia's dependency on its fossil fuel industry first. Right now, the Russian economy could stand to diversify a bit. It's propped up by fossil fuel exports, specifically liquefied natural gas, or LNG. This hasn't been as big of a problem for Russia as it could have been in the past because Western Europe is equally dependent on Russian fuels. Europe needs the energy, Russia needs the money, so for example, during the Cold War, Russia never cut the Western gas tap. Also, previous sanctions against Russia did not disrupt this particular industry. So, some numbers. According to the BBC, in 2019, oil and gas made up 39% of Russia's federal budget revenue and 60% of Russian exports, with those numbers being even higher in specific regions. Additionally, in 2020, the EU was getting nearly half of its gas from Russia, with Germany specifically getting up to 75% of theirs from Russia. Since last year, Russia has been throttling oil and gas to parts of Europe, creating false demand by decreasing the supply. This has led to skyrocketing energy prices and super high profits for Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy firm. In fact, Gazprom's third quarter last year saw a 70% increase in revenue from the previous year, and the people are struggling because of it. They're finding it difficult to pay their energy bills, with some cutting back on non-essential food and personal care items in order to save money. As energy prices have tripled in some places, people are looking for alternative energy sources such as solar and other renewables, a trend that could, in the long run, contribute to the wider adoption of green energy and reduce dependency on fossil fuels. However, many renewables require higher upfront costs for the installation of the necessary infrastructure, and those costs may be untenable to those already struggling financially. Beyond that, some are attempting to burn wood for fuel and heat in the middle of the European winter. But not everyone has a wood-burning fireplace in their homes. In response, the Biden administration is looking for energy alternatives for affected European nations, such as obtaining it from Qatar. The U.S. also has its own natural gas reserves, but transporting LNG across the ocean becomes a little cost prohibitive. Still, Russia could continue to throttle the tap. With the money they've made from artificially inflating the cost of LNG, they've created a buffer for themselves. By some estimates, they could afford to cut off exports entirely for a few months if they wanted to. Of course, with all of these machinations taking place, the people are the ones bearing the brunt of the burden. So it becomes a question of whether or not Putin is okay with letting his own people suffer for a little. So the house I grew up in Connecticut was 150 years old, somewhere around there, and it did have a wood-burning potbelly stove in the middle of the kitchen. Conversely, my 2019 built home has a gas-burning remote-controlled fireplace with fake logs that I can't even start when the power's out. This didn't do me a whole lot of good last year when the Texas power grid failed during the coldest part of winter. Texans across the entire state froze in their homes because our state government didn't do what it was supposed to do. I mention this because it speaks to people's dependency on government institutions and systems. People are realizing the monopolistic nature of the things we are dependent on, and we're seeing that we have little to no alternatives when those systems don't work as they're supposed to. It's not an option to not have power these days. We simply can't go back to the days without electricity or Wi-Fi access. If anything good comes from this situation, perhaps we can begin to diversify our energy portfolios a bit and reduce our collective helplessness as hostile nations attempt to hold us hostage in one way or another.